Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Nice to have you with us. My name is Judith Pucci, and I am a Tribute Museum walking tour guide, as are the two people next to me. We at Tribute all have a personal connection to the attacks of that day, which means that we are family members, first responders, survivors from the towers. Some of us, including me, lived down here in Lower Manhattan, as does Elliot, and others of us volunteered afterwards during the cleanup period. So our stories go beyond the historical events of the day. They explore much more the personal costs of September 11th. So you're going to be hearing from two people who are, one is a survivor, and the other, as I said, Elliot, is a resident of Lower Manhattan. So at the far end is Wendy Lansky, and next to me is Elliot Milling. Now, on September 11th, Wendy worked for Empire Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and it is a huge health insurance company, and they occupied 10 floors in the North Tower at the time. The North Tower is the first building to be attacked that morning. Elliot was, and he still is, a resident here of Lower Manhattan. He lived in Battery Park City, which is directly across the street from the World Trade Center. So he lived there then, and he lives there now. So he still lives right across the street from the World Trade Center. You're going to hear first from Wendy, so I'm just going to quickly set the scene for you. We all know that nearly 3,000 people died that day. 2,749 of them died here at the World Trade Center on the morning of September 11th. What many people are not aware of is that thousands of people also safely evacuated the Trade Center that morning. For the towers alone, it was about 15,000 people, and Wendy was one of them. It's all her.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I just want to first say thank you for being here. For those of us in the 9/11 community, the fact that people come and actively want to hear our stories, especially as the years go on since 9/11, for many of us, it's what keeps us going and kind of stops some of the dark and sad days. So from the bottom of my heart, and I know I speak for these fine folks as well, thank you. As Judith said, I'm a 9/11 survivor. What does that mean? I was on the 29th floor of Tower 1. Tower 1 is also called the North Tower. It's the tower with the big antenna on the top. And for me, it was a regular day. It was a Tuesday. It was gorgeous outside, not unlike today, but no clouds at all. Beautiful day. I worked for a health insurance company. I was a project director, and I was getting ready to go to a really boring weekly status meeting that I had every Tuesday. Wasn't expecting any kind of drama or anything, ready to go. And I got up from my desk about 8:45, and as I was walking down the hall, I heard this tremendous thwack. And then the building I was in, the World Trade Center, actually swayed from side to side. One thing I always like to impress upon people is in a true emergency, there may not be bells, whistles, alarms, or people telling you what to do. A lot of it is instinct. There was nothing. There was a bunch of corporate workers looking at each other saying, what do we do? And probably using more stronger words than that I won't say. So we headed towards the stairs. We went down 29 flights in my case, and about halfway down, I saw all of these firemen in all of their equipment heading up the stairs. And something just didn't equate in my mind. I said, if something small hit our building as our initial reports, why is all of this happening? And why am I smelling fuel? So something made me ask one of the firemen, what actually hit my building? And he said, a jet. And for those of us born and raised in New York, like I am, it just didn't equate. But this is 2001. This is before world terrorism. So we thought pilot error. Maybe the pilot had a heart attack. Never did we think run for your life. And the absence of instant information, because as I tell students when I talk to schools, I'm older than the iPhone and older than the iPad, so we didn't have that instant information. And because people didn't know it was terrorism, the evacuation was far more orderly than you would have expected. People have these visions of people charging down the stairs, but it wasn't. We would walk down a flight, now a doorway would open, another flight would come in, and so forth. By the time I got to the lobby and went into the lobby, that's when I knew something horrific had happened, because although when I started my descent, there was no direction, now everyone was screaming, emergency workers were pointing in all different directions, and I remember distinctly being told, go out the door, cover your head, and whatever you do, don't look up. And they kept saying it, don't look up, don't look up. So what do? You look up, because it's human nature. So I saw the things of nightmares, the things that no human being should see. Giant panes of glass, paper, fire, and the worst of all, humanity, people who made a conscious decision to jump out the window. And there is no amount of therapy or time that puts it out of your head. But I was in full-on survival mode, and as I left the building, there was a woman in the street, complete stranger, who gathered a bunch of us and said, I live nearby, not unlike Elliot here. Come to my house, call your family. A lot of people say, well, why didn't you just get as far away as possible? The answer is no one knew the towers were going down. It was never even a glimmer of thought. So I went to this woman's apartment. Little time went by, maybe 15 minutes, and I heard this horrific sound, like a freight train and a thunderstorm together. And alarms went off, and the woman who owned the apartment said, we have to get out, that's the evacuation alarm. We ran down 5 flights into the street. I was shoeless at that point, having taken my shoes off from the water and the stairways for my original escape, out in the street, and it was like a blizzard. It was so thick, the air, that I could not see this woman in the red blouse in front of me. I could not see anything. I don't have a good sense of direction normally, so I was really terrified that I was running into the problem instead of away from it. I grabbed the first emergency worker I could find, and I said, what way is Battery Park City? Because in my mind, if I went to the Statue of Liberty by the water, maybe there'd be a boat, maybe I could swim, maybe there was an escape. And the terrifying thought was, the emergency worker said, I don't know. So we just kept going. I have asthma, and I started to have breathing problems. I didn't have my inhaler, I had no belongings. I literally yelled out into the crowd, does anybody have an inhaler? Figuring it's New York and everyone's asthmatic. And someone actually tossed one to me as we're running. Just picture this. We're all running, tossed it. I gave a couple puffs, tossed it back. And it was like this wild reaction. A man next to me took off his necktie, put it around my mouth as a shield. Other people, women, were taking off scarves and slips, and everyone was helping everyone else. We got to the water, and I thought, this may not be a great idea because now I'm trapped. There's no boats, where do I go? And fighter planes were coming. Now, we didn't know they were the good guys. We knew at that point that terrorists had driven planes into our buildings. So we laid face down at the water's edge, hoping that these planes were friendly, and they were. By some miracle, like an oasis in the desert, the boats came, and the boats did come, and everyone was lowered into these boats. There were no docks, everyone helped everyone else, and I was rescued by a ferry over to Jersey City. Everyone always says, well, 9/11 had to be the worst day of your life. And for me, the worst day of my life was absolutely 9/12, because on 9/12, people like me found out who we knew was alive and who was not, and who was missing. And I'm sure all of you have seen on TV the missing posters. Picture that, but knowing those faces in the posters. There is no greater hell. And I found out from a coworker that someone I knew was not accounted for, and I knew him, and I knew how reliable he was, and I said, he's gone. If he's not accounted for, he's gone. And I called his sister-in-law, and his posters were out there, and his story is one that I will retell as long as there is breath in my body, because he stayed with his friend who was a quadriplegic in a wheelchair, and they waited for help, and the help came because they called their families and they said, great news, the firemen are here, we're going to come down the stairs. But unfortunately, time was not on their side, and they perished. And that is why people like me and people like Elliot and Judith are still telling our stories this many times later, because for every name that you see on that memorial, that's somebody, as I like to say, brother, sister, friend, coworker, somebody. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Within seconds of the first plane striking the North Tower, first responders were already rushing down to the Trade Center. That was in large part because when the first plane does hit the first building, in firehouses throughout the city, the night shift is ending and the day shift is beginning. So this overlap meant that there were firefighters by the thousands. Some of them hadn't gone home yet, and many of them were already reporting for the day shift. So they came rushing down, all of them. So they are rushing to the Trade Center, and soon thousands also of Lower Manhattan residents are finding out that their lives are just being turned upside down because their homes are really no longer homes. They're living in what becomes basically a war zone. Many of them are not even going to be able to return to their homes. And Elliot is going to tell you about that experience.
Thank you. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the museum. I'm a resident of Lower Manhattan in Battery Park City, and my building is located 1 block to the west of where World Trade Center number 2 used to stand. On the morning of 9/11, shortly before 9 o'clock, my wife and I were getting ready to go to work. On the way down in the elevator, someone said a plane hit the North Tower. All right, so what do you think? You certainly don't think terrorism. You don't think it was an airliner that hit the building. You think maybe a small plane lost control and went into the building. However, when we get down onto the street and I look up at the North Tower, I can see the top of it in flames with thick black smoke pouring out of it, and I'm seeing people jumping out of the windows. It was truly a horrible sight. We're standing down there, we're watching this. I hear the roar of a plane. I look up at the South Tower, and I see the second plane approaching the building. In a second, it smashes into the building with a tremendous explosion. My wife and I realize at this time, this is not an accident. We're under attack. We better get out of here. So what we do is we walk downtown towards the tip of Manhattan. We didn't think that the towers are going to collapse. And as it turned out, my wife had another appointment in another office downtown. I had to go down into the train station to wait for a train that would take me across the river into Brooklyn. So I'm on the platform waiting for a train. Nothing is stopping. I'm down there maybe 30, 35 minutes. I'll go back up onto the sidewalk, trying to figure out what to do, and that's when the South Tower collapsed. I never saw it because of all of the tall buildings around me. I didn't even hear it. But day turned to night, and I was enveloped in a dust storm so thick I could not see my hands in front of my face. It was pitch black. When that dust finally settled, all land phones are out, all cell phones are out. There's no way that I can communicate with my wife to find out what might have happened to her. So I decide I'm going to go back to my building. Maybe my wife will be there, and hopefully we can get together. So that's what I do. When I get to my building, I don't see anyone. I don't see my wife. I don't see anyone I recognize. But I start hearing people shouting, everyone has to leave. There's going to be a gas explosion. Well, we don't know if that's true or not. But of course, you don't want to wait to find out. So what I do is I run down to the Hudson River, and there are boats there. It looked like 100 of them, all different sizes, all different shapes, ferries, tugboats, motorboats, evacuating people from Lower Manhattan. I get on a tugboat. We set out for New Jersey. Heading west in that direction was gorgeous. The sun is shining, the sky is blue. It was lovely looking to the west. But I did turn around, and I looked to the east, and I saw the devastation here. It was then that I felt I'll never feel safe again living here in New York City. Well, at any rate, when we get to the Jersey side of the Hudson, we're met by a team. They hose us down, and they take us to an army base where they feed us, and they allow us to make a phone call. I'm able to reach my daughter, who at the time lived on the Upper East Side, and luck, she's talking to my wife. I find out that she evacuated the area by walking uptown along the FDR Drive, which is a major highway running along the east side of Manhattan. Well, to make a long story short, we do in fact get together, and because we couldn't move back into our apartment, we moved into our daughter's apartment, which was a studio apartment. She went to stay with her boyfriend. But we weren't able to stay in that apartment very long because directly in front of her window was a big hole in the roadway. And every time one of those big vehicles rolled over that hole, it was like an explosion. And my wife and I would flash back to the South Tower getting hit by the plane. Impossible to stay there. So what I did was to call Red Cross. They put us up at a hotel, and we were out of our apartment for 3.5 months. When everything got back to normal, we were able to move back in. And let me tell you something, moving back in was a very, very tough thing to do because the air quality down here was terrible. There was noise, there was a haze in the sky. It was very, very unpleasant living down here in Lower Manhattan. But we stayed, and we are so thankful that we did, because living here, Battery Park City, Lower Manhattan, my wife and I feel we're on a holiday every day of the week. The area here is back 1,000%. Without a doubt, it's one of the great people-friendly places you're going to find anywhere. They've got such a lovely esplanade on the other side of West Street. They've got the Winter Garden, which is one of our city's great, great venues. So let me tell you something. If anyone asks me, I always tell them that living here in Battery Park City, Lower Manhattan, is living in the best neighborhood in the city of New York. So thank you so much for listening.
Elliot, it may have sounded odd to people to hear you say that when you got over to New Jersey, that you were hosed down. Why were you hosed down? Explain that.
I was hosed down because I was from head to foot covered with dust. And that's what happened when people were caught in that cloud. So to get rid of all of the dust, they took a hose and sprayed me all over.
The debris cloud that we've all seen that was rolling through Lower Manhattan, we all call it a dust cloud. Technically, it's known as a debris cloud. That was the pulverized remains of the towers themselves as they collapsed. Everything that was those buildings, if it wasn't steel, it was either pulverized or vaporized. So you had concrete, pulverized concrete, all of that. You had toxins, carcinogens. Think only of what is in a janitor's closet. When you use it to clean, it's fine. You vaporize all of that. All of this is extremely toxic material. So dust gives you the idea that you do this and it goes away. This material, when it was on your skin and on your clothing, it didn't move when you did this. You actually had to be hosed down, high-pressured hosing to get it off of you.
And you could feel it because I guess the asbestos or something, you could feel it on your skin. Just whatever it was just itchy and irritating.
Oh, interesting. Yes, there was some asbestos in the towers too, so dust sounds pretty innocuous. It really wasn't. And you were breathing that in too. So it was pretty treacherous stuff. Now, we're going to open this up to all of you. Do you have any questions? They'd be very happy to answer any questions you might have.
Don't be shy, we're in New York.
Yes. Please, go right ahead, yes. That's a great question.
Me?
Yeah.
So far, so good. I'm fine. I wish I could say the same thing for firefighters and police officers, but you pick up the newspaper every day, and every day they're dying. But for me, so far, so good. I was fine. And I am fine so far.
Actually, I'm glad that Elliot made that point. Firefighters, people that worked on the pile, at this point, it's 17 years. Asbestos alone. When you inhale asbestos, the illnesses that result from it do not begin to manifest until about 15 to 20 years after inhalation. The cancers that have developed, the deaths that have developed. So many people have died who worked on the pile. So many more people are going to continue to die over the years to come. There's finally going to be a second memorial outside to acknowledge the people who spent time here working on the pile in the nearly 9 months after the attacks it took away to clean away the World Trade Center. It's going to be outside. It will not affect the two pools. They are for the day itself. But to the side of the South Memorial Pool, there's a large grassy area. That is where the new memorial will be. It will honor the lives of everyone who has died and those who will continue to die in the years to come. Other questions?
I have an autoimmune disease called sarcoidosis, which impacts like your lymph nodes and sometimes breathing and sinus membranes and things like that. But I have a very mild version of it, so I count myself among the people who shouldn't complain for all the reasons that Judith and Elliot mentioned. But it just shows you, I was there for 1 day and I have a problem. So imagine the guys who worked on the site without a mask for days and weeks and months.
We have time for one more question, anyone? Please.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
The perception of
Perception of
safety now. Oh,
I think that people view it differently. I think that there are things in place now that were not in place before, like some of the barricades. But I can speak for myself and other people who I know are 9/11 survivors, and we don't kid ourselves to think that we're quote unquote safe. We don't let it rule our lives.
yeah.
But, you know, you see, if you go to any of the big transportation hubs here, Newark Airport, Penn Station, Port Authority, you see the anti-terrorism squads all in black with the machine guns. And I know sometimes that freaks out tourists, but I kind of look at it the other way. I want to see those guys. Because in my mind, at least, maybe they're a deterrent. Maybe somebody who wants to do something stupid will say, New York is ready for it now. So I'm happier to see those guys than to not.
I just let it affect my life. I don't think about it. You're always aware that it's there, but I just don't think about it at all, and it doesn't enter my thoughts.
I would agree. It's not in
Yeah.
the forefront of my
Yeah.
mind. I'm not naive. If I see something peculiar, I will tell a police officer, but I do not let it alter anything that I do
Right.
or anything like that. Good question, though. Everyone, we are going to have to wrap up now, but if you do have any more questions, please, right outside that exit, they will be there. They'll be very happy to continue this with all of you. Thank you. You chose to spend some of your time with us. Thank you all very much.